Hello, and welcome to the Cooperative Political Podcast, Episode 2. I'm your host, Jackson Clark. Joining me is my other host, Nate Smith.
Hey.
Today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different than the last episode. We're going to be talking more about a political topic and more of a debate surrounding it. So, with that, I'm going to let Nate introduce our topic for the day.
Our topic today, fake news. Not just a slung around term, but the usage of non-factual biased information.
Exactly. So I'm kind of gonna be supporting here. Fake news is as a buzzword and how it, a lot of the time the leftists can be kind of, and rightists, don't get me wrong, the left and the right can be kind of biased in the way that they just deliver their news, and it can be really annoying for someone who just kind of wants to get the news in an easy manner and doesn't really just want to have to like peek around to find news. And Nate's going to be weighing in on his topic as well, his side of the argument, and hopefully we'll be able to bring in a caller later on in the episode. So to start it off, basically, the thing is nowadays is fake news, right? You will hear people from both sides just call fake news upon the other. Hey, Fox News, they're fake. They're the worst. Hey, CNN, they're the worst. They're just, they're fake. They don't deliver anything normally. And it's a buzzword at this point. But really, fake news has been dating back for years, all the way since radio was invented, with just biased opinions, and not just necessarily from the lefts or the right, but just people that want to tailor news their way. So let's see. We got a show, right? The Cronkite Show back in the roughly the 50s and 60s, and it was a very biased news network, and the Cronkite guy, he just kind of wanted to tell it his way, and which is fine if you want to do it for entertainment purposes, but for someone that just wants to get the news, it's very difficult to work around, and he's spoon feeding you his version of it. But that's kind of what we're going to be discussing today. And I'm going to kind of be defending some of President Trump's statements and his accusation of fake news. And Nate's going to kind of be showing me how it's done, right? So, Nate, why don't you start us off here?
Okay. So, even though fake news has been around for hundreds of years, it's essentially just saying, "Oh well, it exists, so we shouldn't care." You can't have that. Yes, it's been around, but many groups have been actively working all over the past 2 centuries to get rid of this entire fake news trend. It's it's not it's not true. It misleads the public, and it just causes chaos. You have people who say something is true, won't back it up. If they're asked on it, they change their mind, and so then you don't get the news you're actually looking for. For instance, with your Trump tweets, essentially, and your trend of fake news, look at InfoWars. InfoWars has multiple times been essentially dismissed as nothing but sensational or clickbait and has nothing to do with the news. Chemicals do not turn frogs gay. Chemtrails do not exist. 9/11 did happen. Sandy Hook did happen, and it was not because of the government. You cannot take this news, which our president has multiple times praised and or used, as actual news that should be used by the general public. It's
Okay, so let's start with a little thing called context, right? So I don't personally think that the President Trump has used InfoWars a lot. I know that he was close with the creator of InfoWars, but he's not exactly, he hasn't quoted it as much as he's quoted Fox News, right? His big buzzword is CNN. He is not a fan of CNN. I personally am not a fan of CNN. And I do think that CNN happens to be fake news. And sometimes they will tailor their articles to be more entertainment than the actual deliverance of news, which personally annoys me as a show, the John Oliver show, right? Great show. I know people love it. There's members of my family that love the show. But personally, I feel like he crosses the line in entertainment over news to the point where he will spin the news article. And yes, he gets all of his sources right. He'll spin the news article in order to entertain people instead of bringing them the news. And thus is what I would consider fake news, is displaying yourself as a news organization when really you're just entertaining people, not delivering the news. Back to you, Nate.
Okay, so you can you can always cry fake news as much as you want, but doing so doesn't help. It just says, okay, it's fake, so what? But when you just look at the data itself, there's an infographic I've pulled up, and it says there's it's mixed. So you have all the way to the left and all the way to the right. You have all the way to the right, and that is Infowars, Daily Caller, Breitbart. They they're not reputable. You can't read them and actually get good information out of them. On the other side is Addicting Info, Natural News, David Waffle, I guess. So these are both the extremes of the spectrum. You have things in the middle, which they have some questionable styles, and they could be called for fraudulent news. But you have in the middle, and that is the biggest part. They're slightly skewing the information, but on a depth, you have things like Vox, the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, uh, NPR, BBC, The Washington Post, New York Times, ABC, NBC, AP, and Reuters. And then you have some things in the bottom hovering below the bar of InfoWars. Just above is CNN. So you could call CNN as fake news, but it doesn't help. I mean, you can cry wolf all you want, but no one's gonna come. I mean, people watch CNN and they're not gonna stop watching CNN. So you need to actually do something about it, or else nothing's gonna be done. Do you?
As this is the cooperative political podcast, I feel that I want to kind of display in my, 16-year-old, whatever, kind of, in my opinion, what we could do to fix fake news, right? And not just on my side, not just on your side, but it's just the people. It's annoying, right? To be reading an article and then to find out later that it was skewed for political reasons is incredibly annoying and it's frustrating. And I think that's where some of the anger from the people towards CNN and the people towards Fox News comes from, is because in the end, you're getting a manipulated product. I wanted to know how the war in Libya was going, but instead I got like their political agenda. It's like, that's not what I want. Right. And I think as a people, we can come together and work towards a solution, and just stuff like this, where we are going to try to sift through the most to bring you guys, kind of what somewhat clean news, but just as a society ourselves, to maybe not just read the CNN article, maybe read one or two, maybe read one from Fox and one from CNN and piece it together, kind of thing. It doesn't have to be just, we don't have to be, there's no one stop. There's places like, I'd consider Bloomberg somewhat reputable, but there's other reputable um news sources, and there's underground stuff where they're not influenced by political agenda, something like the Huffington Post and something like John Oliver or Fox News, where it can be neutral, and you can actually get something out of it. You can get the news out of it. And I think that's really what we need to be working towards as a society, as a people, really.
Yeah. Um. It's it's kind of hard to do though, because you're effectively asking people who have cemented their ideas and how they function, how they think about the world, and you've cemented the places they get their news that best fits them. So, speaking of political agendas, it's a company. The companies will cry fake news because it's interesting. You'll always read fake news. it doesn't actually have to be real. If you read it, it doesn't matter. And that's a huge problem because you'll now have once reputable sources such as the Huffington Post, and they'll just basically clickbait you. So you'll want to read their articles, they want you to read their articles, but no one cares if they're actually good articles and they're giving you the full information that you need, the truthful information.
I want to tell a little story, right? So, what was it? Like 2012, 2013, there used to be this news station called Vice, right? Now you know it as Viceland, it's a huge TV network, but it used to be pretty underground in one website. And it was a, really, it was a fun place to go get news. My father, loved it, right? Then they became mainstream. And you watched as this lovely small news source with like a team working to get out articles, got a TV show, and got a TV channel, right? And they're cranking out these documentaries and they're sending these people in to spin their web for them and get this political agenda out for the left party. And it not only frustrating, but it was depressing that money was what influenced how they told news. And it shows just kind of the greed in the world a little bit and kind of how annoying it is. And, I try to find the middle ground where I can have a very incredibly enjoyable experience with the news, but actually get the news, actually find out what's going on in my world, and not just be spoon fed political agendas. And it almost, it's almost like a controversial conspiracy theory here. And it's like, why does money have to influence our news and why does money have to influence our politics so much? But that really is how it is. If, if Hillary Clinton was like, hey, Huffington Post, here's $1 million. Please spin a web against Trump, right? It could be something as, or hey, Donald Trump calling, don't tell the Cohen story. It could be just as simple as that. And it's just, money can influence our politics, and it's really a corrupt system. And it's funny because we sit on our sofas and we just watch the news and we think, we're getting a good day, but then we end up, we walk down the street and my neighbor says, wow, that's not what I heard from this station or whatever. And it's like, wow, this is crazy, right? And it's just, I wish that we could kind of change it, but it's definitely going to be a fight that we'll all have to kind of pursue if we ever wanted to end quote unquote fake news.
It's it's a shame. I mean, like you you look at news and it's all money regulated. I mean, you don't have news sources now anymore who are trying to just give you the news and with no real agenda behind the curtains. It's just news, but that's gone now. You can't survive as a news source without having like a being popular. You need to sell articles and you need to sell them en masse. And the only way to do that is stuff that makes people interested, which like fake
Yeah.
news.
So we do have one caller this week who's going to come in, and I believe he's going to weigh in on the topic of fake news. So I'd like to invite to the call here or whatever, Evan W here. So come on in, Evan.
Right. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. You're
All right,
live.
cool. So, the kind of what Nate said earlier, kind of when you really kind of put in perspective, a lot of these, depending on your political views, your definition of fake news can kind of be shifted. So he said that different news can kind of appeal to different people. And if it kind of goes against what you're saying, then it could also be considered fake news. But I do feel like, especially in this age of Donald Trump, and how he was kind of his campaign was reported on and all that stuff. If you kind of compare the two aisles of the news reporting, there's a distinct difference. CNN, they back after Trump was elected, they spent hours and hours reporting on the fake dossier that was even proved false before they stopped reporting on it. While I guess Fox News, they kind of said this is fake by the time that they said it was fake. So they were kind of, I guess, taking what the outside information was and reporting it, while CNN was still kind of spinning on that, even after some of their own executives were caught on tape, kind of admitting that they're making a lot of it up.
That's actually an interesting insight. It's funny, that whole dilemma during the election was funny because literally this past election was really when I started to get interested in politics and when I started reading about this stuff in the past elections. And it was funny how I could easily go to a different, like, news source. I could go to HuffPost, I could go to Vox, I could go to Vice, I could go to Fox News, I could go to the Daily Mail, I could go to Daily Wire, I could go to all of these different sources and get a totally different story
Mm.
on the fact that Trump colluded with Russia, right? Or whatever. However you want to spin that. And Hillary's emails, are they deleted? No. Are they, did they ever exist? No way. Like it was all of this drama and it was all different, and it's that shows how twisted it became. And it was just like Nate said, you're selling articles to people. How crazy is that? That's the world we have to survive in. You don't just sit down with your newspaper and read the news. You have to literally be sold an article that's scrolling past your Snapchat feed, so you read why CNN thinks that Fortnite is dying this week. And it's just incredibly sad. And I hope that the listeners that are watching just can understand that maybe take a little time tomorrow. And when you want to read up on Libya, just kind of read up on it instead of just kind of. I'm sorry, I saw Libya in the headlines yesterday. I've mentioned it like 3 times this podcast, but maybe just take a moment to read up on the situation there and how much of a mess it is, and how they ISIS has invaded towns and stuff there, and instead of just getting spoon fed this, not garbage, but these loaded news articles that may not have 100% news.
I also remember probably one of the most striking articles I've ever read was when the New York Times openly endorsed Hillary Clinton. Which, I mean, definitely, if that's not a red flag in kind of the terms of fake news, then I don't really know what is.
Yeah, they're in the middle. They're like smack dab in the middle of this, like in a chart. They're not left. They're not right. They're not
Well, I
liberal
mean, if
nor
you read some of
conservative.
the New York Times articles, some of them are definitely left leaning, even especially a lot of their opinion pieces, which are kind of the same as their normal pieces, especially in these days. But especially with who them as an organization is hiring. I remember this is quite recent. They hired an open racist, whose tweets were not removed. You can go onto, I forget the woman's name, but if you go onto her page, you can view all these tweets about how she hates white people and how they aren't removed. But that's a different story. But
Yeah, that's talking about just privatization of the social media platforms in general, and that could be a whole nother episode.
But then even if you think about that, how they call out they've openly called Trump racist and all this stuff without backing anything up. Well, meanwhile, that's what they're hiring and then defending that. So I think there's kind of what the fake news can come from. So it really isn't. When you call it fake news, it's not really fake news. It's just kind of molding the news to like what you want it to be.
Exactly. It's still the
That's
news.
spot on.
It's there's still Trump still got elected. They're just kind of trying to move it around to hope that they can sell you the article and it's eye catching
Mhm.
and that you can understand it. But Evan, thank you so much for calling in. That's a pretty different. That's a little bit of a different insight, and I hope the viewers kind of enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. See you later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that was awesome. I mean,
Yeah, that was a loaded question. Yeah, a little bit of
it's
insight.
it's good to just sit down and talk about something that, well, we are even influenced by. I mean, we have to give you the news, but we get our news from other news sources because we don't just
Yep.
go out and report. So that that affects us because now we need to know that our sources, which we're now relaying to you, are
Yeah,
actually on
are true.
point, or else
Uh,
our thing is kind of useless. I mean, you could just go and read Breitbart and you'd get the same content value if we don't get our news right.
So this is something that we could just share right now. So Nate gathered the show notes for this episode, and I've got 4 pictures in front of me displaying all these different medias and where all these different news things fall in the line of quote unquote fake news. And I'll tell you this: all of these are vastly different than the others, and every single news platform falls in. And you see that some of these news platforms themselves are spinning other news platforms and where they're located in the realm of fake news, and it shows the corruption. It shows what Evan just talked about. It shows what Nate and I have been talking about. And I just kind of want to display that we need to change this.
It's a
This is
pyramid.
something that the people can change, right? Procurement of news does not have to be spoon-fed to us, right? Go out and just figure out what you want. Find your news sources, right? Send them here or whatever. Join the Discord. There should be a link. Come be on the show, but just you don't have to get spoon fed. And I don't want to be InfoWars like,
We
they're putting
don't.
chemicals in the water and turning the friggin' frogs gay. But this is different. We can change things.
We
So
want we want to not have a pyramid of information where the vast majority of it is uncreditable or useless, and the teeny tiny group of news sources at the top are actually usable. We want,
Mhm.
well, I don't know, I just get a straight line
Yeah,
very top
right.
where you can trust all of the news sources you get.
Well, here's to a better future. We're wrapping up this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. This one's a little bit longer. Um, so this is probably still going to be a part of the soft launch. So if you're listening and you made it to this far, thank you so much for listening, my friends and family and Nate's friends and family. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Political Podcast, Cooperative Political Podcast. Um, let us know what your thoughts were, just by DMing me or Nate. We're glad you listened, and I hope we get to do this again because I absolutely love talking about politics.
Well,
So
tune in next time. See ya.
tune in next time.
Bye bye.